Okay. I have to give Sully credit. I really love that black room that she's got. I mean, I'm not being funny. I like that. I wish I could. My wife would let me paint it black and dark. I like it dark. This one, she's got Arabia on it. Arabia is a Darlie non-supporter. I've never seen it. This is my first time. I'm gonna go through a half hour of it or so and see where the contradictions are and see if there's any false information being spread. She might not be able to do that with a non-supporter on her panel.
If she's innocent, follow me, then, don't. So we might be a little biased here. So,
and that's okay. Like, I get it. Yeah. But I just think that even though there's so many different opinions, I think there needs to be a space where people can actually talk and dialogue. This does not have to be a prove you wrong debate.
No.
Okay. This does not have to be a prove you wrong debate, which is, I mean, it's a good statement. But when you start and you enter, Sully came into the non-supporters' life as a supporter of Darlie's, who has a background in criminal expertise to the point where that she was able to get on a stand, she said, and testify in a capital murder case that involved a gunshot wound to the head. That's how I met her. And I genuinely had no issue with her at all. When she said that in Rich's chat, which I've got it copied. It's in my video somewhere. I'll find it. But when she claimed that in Rich's chat, my general honest feeling was, wow, that's cool. I'd like to get to know her, know a little bit more about what she knows. She knows something about this case. Maybe I can learn something. Maybe she could teach us something. That's what I was thinking. Good. I had positive thoughts about that. So I asked her, and I guess she thought I was trying to dig at her or something. But I said, well, what case was that you served in? Because I wanted to go look at it. I wanted to go see what the experts in the case had to say. I want to know more about her background as an expert, not as solely. Because when new supporters show up, which they do every 5 or 6 years, we've got a Sully, and then they go away. Sully will go away. She'll go away, just like the rest of them do. They come in with new stuff, and I always give them the benefit of the doubt. Like Damien Fragapney, Fragapane, he's a legit supporter that is an attorney, and he's been in the support while he was going through law school and all that. And we would bicker back and forth, but there was never anything personal against him. He is a valued uh, support for Darlie, and he's been around for a while. And we argue back and forth, and it gets messy. But I respect the fact that he's an attorney giving his opinion, and I would have respected Sully's more had she actually been an expert in a crime case. But she's not. She's just not. She never has been. First of all, you have to have years of background before they consider you an expert. She doesn't have years of background in anything. She skipped from the medical field, she says, to working for the medical examiner, to counseling, to working in a funeral home. So she's not consistent where she's at. She's too young to have that many careers. Something's off with that.
Because who's gonna, who at the end of the day, and we're gonna get into the Innocence Project and Vanessa, it's their job to figure it out. Like, I can't really do anything as a civilian sitting here behind my.
And there's just no reason for people to be that emotionally charged over, for one, someone that you don't know.
Well, here's the thing. It depends on what side of it that you're on, and it depends on where your passion is in it. I feel like for me that I'm being a voice for Devin and Damon who can't speak. So I am personally charged when someone comes out in support of Darlie and tells a flat ass lie, and we know it's a lie. I feel like it's disrespectful to the memory of Devin and Damon. I just feel like it's disrespectful, and it always pisses me off when they come out with a lie on the case, it always has irked me to no end. Even when I was a supporter, and I would see supporters lie, and they would say something that I knew wasn't correct. That would piss me off. It just pisses me. It depends on your passion for Devin and Damon.
And I see hate on both sides, and it's just not.
Like Danelle, I mean, people treat Danelle as if she was, Darlie.
If somebody was in that crime scene with Darlie, and they lied to protect Darlie, then they're just as guilty of that crime as Darlie is. If you willingly lie to protect a killer, you are just as bad as that killer. Superficial doesn't mean a minor wound. She lost half her blood. My dad's not a molester. Darlie's DNA was on the outside of the sock. Those are lies. She sat right on 2020 and lied and said that Darlie lost half of her blood. That's disrespectful to Devin and Damon. They can't speak. I can. I can.
If that she committed a crime.
And Danelle has done no wrong. There is nothing wrong about her loving and supporting her sister.
Nope, there is nothing wrong with her loving and supporting her sister. My son is a baby killer. He killed a 2-year-old little boy. I love him and I support him in doing the time that he was given. I support him in completing that time. He's lucky he didn't catch the death penalty. But what I'm not doing is coming to you and saying, my son didn't kill that baby. Wasn't him. It was this guy that lived next door that was a drug dealer, and the housekeeper had a bad. I'm not doing that because I know that my son killed this child. And even though I get accused of it, some of these other people accuse me of saying this and that, it's all fake. They did that because I wouldn't respond to them. I know my son is guilty. I wish that there was something I could do to bring Braden Ferguson back, but there isn't. They lie. They disregard Devin and Damon's lives.
That is not a crime. I stood by my loved one the whole 27 years he was on death row, and I'm going to be there till the end, no matter what that end is.
And that's what I've said. People have asked me, what happens when Darlie's found guilty? Well, you know what? Then I will support her family through that.
Darlie's already been found guilty. Miss Detective. You would support their family. Let's say, right now, the family feeds you a lot of information. You get a lot of information from them because you go to see them and all that. You've met them all, which is cool. If, let's say, some evidence comes up and it proves to you beyond a doubt that she's guilty, then that means all those people that you put your faith in have lied to you. And it means all these people that you think are a bad person, like myself, have been trying to tell you. Been trying to tell people these are lies. That woman committed these crimes. That's my point. I don't make any money off of this. I don't get any fame for not like I used to. I mean, I used to, even before when I had my bigger channel and I was catching 100,000 views easy. My Darlie videos were not monetized. Some of my other ones were. Because back then, when you put a video out, you also had the option of, putting the ads in place, the little yellow dots. You put the ads in place where you want them to show up on your video. So if you felt like you had a good video, you'd put a lot of dots in, put a lot of ads in to get that ad revenue. My channel, my money for Darlie videos was turned off. It always was turned off. Now some of the other ones, granted, I did leave it on. I made some money on YouTube, but never with the Darlie case. Never have I done that. Not with that one. That one's on. This is on the house. Yeah.
Exactly, because you can separate her loved ones from whatever your opinions are about her.
And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, you should separate someone's loved ones from them. You shouldn't be making comments like Danelle made about me. Like his son killed a baby, so who's he think he is? You know what I'm saying? But you're not separating what my son did from me. I didn't kill anybody, and I didn't tell him to do that. And if I'd known he was going to do it, I would have stopped him. See, you're not practicing what you preach on this one.
Well, why don't we go ahead and we have some things we want to talk about here. Hold on. My list.
Her camera didn't freeze. She's just having some kind of weird heroin flashback right now. It makes her hair stand up on end. She'll be all right here in just a second.
Okay, sorry, couldn't hear me. I was saying I'm looking at the list of content and the pictures that we had pulled. While I do that, why don't you go ahead and lead us into the crime Arabia? Why don't you go ahead and just start us like 2 a.m. that morning, where Darlie and Darren are going upstairs, and we might backtrack a little bit, but basically that's kind of the start of the crime. So why don't you lead us in? Everybody kind of knows my theories. If people have followed my channel, people know what I think, but you can obviously go pull it up on YouTube. We reenacted the call actually because hearing the call and everything that goes in is can be hard, and there's so many dispatchers talking to police, talking to 911.
There's one dispatcher.
That there's a lot of background chatter, and they did try and clean up that video for the trial, but we reenacted it and took out a lot of the background.
Yeah, and you put in a lot of stuff that you wanted to put in on that reenactment that you should be ashamed of. You should be ashamed of that.
So in our first episode on Kitchen Table Research podcast, which you can find anywhere, if you go listen to our first, you can hear it without all that background chatter. But the first thing that happens is when the call comes into 911, the dispatcher dispatches the call as an unknown medical emergency. And since you're
So when a lot of people
take over, yeah.
I don't know how many people actually know the case, how many people have.
Actually, Waddell left because the fire codes came on while he was sitting at Victory Baptist Church, 1.9 miles away from 5801 Eagle Drive. He heard the fire codes go off, and he heard it was a stabbing.
Understand the case, but the call was dispatched as an unknown medical emergency. So the officer that first arrived on the scene, first of all, did not know that 2 children had been brutally stabbed.
Let's take a look. He did not know that it was 2 kids. I agree with that, but let's take a look. Moving quickly to Officer David Waddell's testimony as the first responding officer to 5801 Eagle Drive. Just as I stated, he begins by telling where he was at 2:30 a.m. He's showing where he was in that church. It's unusual for you. They sit in that parking lot to catch speeders. Okay, do you recall whether you were or not you were doing anything specific when you were up there? No, sir. Did anything unusual catch your attention as you were sitting in your squad car at 2:30 in the morning there at the Baptist church? Okay. According to Mystery Maverick, David Waddell was asleep in his cruiser. He said, I heard the fire tones go off. What do you mean the fire tones? Well, whenever a dispatcher sends the fire department somewhere, they set off the tones on the police radio as well as the fire channel. Okay, your radio in your car, does it have a ability to monitor the channel also? Yes, it does. All right, and following the emergency tones, what's the next thing you heard come over the radio? I switched over to the fire channel and heard them dispatch the fire department to 5801 Eagle on a stabbing. On a stabbing. And did you do anything in response to hearing that over your radio? He just went over there. Oh, wow. See, I got all that right. I'm good with details on this case. Here, But the thing is, he knew it was a stabbing. That's why he didn't respond uh, by wasting time calling. I'm going over there. He just went over there. He was trying to get there quickly. Heard there was a stabbing.
That is something false that is out there that, he should have did this, he should have done that. He was not expecting to arrive on a scene where two children had just been basically butchered.
But he was expecting to arrive to a scene where someone was stabbed. He didn't know it was that extent, but he was hurrying up to get over there, because their second order of priority is to clear the scene, be sure the suspect isn't around, and to get medical attention to someone.
And
also, there's an intruder in the house. So he has one hand on the gun where he confronts Darren trying to come.
He doesn't realize that there's an intruder in the house or a story of a home break-in until Darlie tells him. He doesn't know. He hears there's a stabbing, and he pulls up at this scene in the middle of the night, and there's a guy standing in the front yard with no shirt on, no shoes on, pair of jeans. So, stabbing, weird-looking suspect guy out in the park in the driveway. So, of course, he draws his gun. Now, a lot of supporters will tell you this, that wasn't Darren that was in the yard. That Waddell didn't pull his gun. That was an intruder, and that Waddell let him go away. That was one that they used to run with constantly. But they fail to mention William Gorsuch and his wife. And I'm going to tell you what, I've got a pre-recorded call with her. I think her name's Gail. She did not want me to use it. And I'm not going to use it unless she's no longer around to debate it. I will tell you this. What he said on the stand is exactly the way it happened. And that came straight from his wife.
Out to get the neighbor, the nurse across the street, and he has a flashlight. From the time he is, also him giving CPR, I know that that's a big thing, is he should have helped the child. Well, what if there was an intruder in the house? What if he disarmed him?
I don't know what you meant about the flashlight. He did not have a flashlight in the yard.
Himself, and he was bent down over that child, and an intruder picked up his gun.
Absolutely, because Waddell, we were just in a different debate, and Waddell was asked on the stand, what is his first priority? Was he trained as his first priority when coming up on a crime scene like that one that's inside somewhere? His first priority is to be sure there's no intruder. Second priority is to get medical attention there. So when Waddell walked in and she's telling him, oh no, he went out in the garage, his first priority is he's got to figure out if there's someone still in there. He can't be down giving medical attention. He could have if he had some backup, but he was the only officer there. Now, if 3 or 4 of them pulled up at the same time, they can send 2 of them out to the garage, 2 of them drop, that's what they would do. But Waddell was going by what he was trained to do. He was not trained to come into a scene and drop down on the ground and start helping somebody medically. He's a cop, not a paramedic. He was there to police.
Gun and shot and killed everybody. That
Darlie's guilty would have. Darlie, they don't know
exactly. So a lot of people don't see that in the context it actually happened in real life. And officers are trained in a situation like that
because it's flagging us for community guidelines. So just be careful about what you say and the way you say it.
Now, if you notice, she's telling her Arabia to be careful what she says because she don't want to get flagged for community guidelines. You can't say words like murder. So she says schmurder or mixual assault. But when she went on Rich's panel, she didn't have no problem saying those words. And I noticed that right away. And I was like, well, how come you're not having that kind of with restraint on Rich's channel that you are on yours? Hey, Rich Prater, if you're watching this, I hope you noticed that too, because I sure noticed it. That's where I'm good is intuition. I can read people pretty well.
Tell me so I don't say it.
I know you have to, so community guidelines and saying, instead of saying like MURDER or.
Oh, got you. Okay.
Like she said that word several times on Rich's podcast with her. She didn't have any regard for his channel, only her own. That's self-centeredness right there. That's just a little sign of your self-centeredness right there.
So yeah, so the officer, if it would have been a situation where there was not an intruder in the home, as was thought, he could have very well have administered some type of medical aid to the child. However, both his hands were full. And even though he's not actively running through the house looking for a suspect, officers are also trained to wait for backup, because just because what was used in that
absolutely, she's dead on.
Particular case doesn't mean he didn't have a
Right.
the intruder. So and from the time the officer got there until the second officer arrived was a matter of minutes. We're not talking about 30 minutes. We are talking like
like 2 minutes. I think Walling pulled up.
Single digit number of minutes.
EMT, actually Waddell is either following EMT or vice versa into the neighborhood, but EMT has to sit in the ambulance. And
Waddell didn't follow anybody in the neighborhood. He was the first one to arrive. Did you finally arrive at 5801 Eagle Drive? Yes, I did. Were you the first police officer on the scene? Yes, sir. As you entered the neighborhood there, did you see any vehicles on the roadway? No. Did you see any persons on foot in the neighborhood as you approached the house? No. Just Darren Routier. All right. When you say Darren Routier, do you know him now to be Darren Routier? Yes, I do. It was Walling who was following an ambulance. And I don't want to be too picky about details, but she got that wrong. And it's just a minute detail. But the key to debating this case and putting it out to the public is to know those small details. It's a small detail, but it could be a big detail somewhere else. But right now, I know that Waddell pulled up by himself, and he wasn't following any ambulance.
Have to wait until the police clear the scene. One officer could not clear the scene by himself.
that is,
We had a case here where a house caught on fire. The EMS could not go in and get the lady out of the house until the fire department arrived. Like, that's not something that was individual to just this particular case. That is across the board how first responders are trained.
and if I was an EMT and I'm a last responder, I'm not a first responder, I'm a last responder, I'm a mortician. So I only show up after all of this stuff has been done. But I do know, maybe more than the average person. If I had gotten an unknown medical emergency call at 2:30 in the morning.
But he didn't get an unknown medical emergency call at 2:30 in the morning. You got a call about a stabbing at 2:30 in the morning. That's an important detail. That shows you his method of thinking on his way to that scene.
To this really nice suburban neighborhood, I think some guy had a heart attack.
He probably thought he was walking into a heart attack.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
He knew he was walking into a stabbing.
Somebody got up and broke their hip and fell in the middle of the night.
And not only that, but and I'm not defending.
Again, that's why that Waddell, when he heard the fire codes, people give some supporters say, well, he wasn't even supposed to be there because he didn't report back to dispatch that he was on the way. That's also why you have some confusion as to who Doris Trammell is speaking to the 911 dispatcher at the time, who's talking to who, because she didn't know that police were already there or cops there. She didn't. There, I can explain that more later. But when you listen to that 911 call, the reason that there's a little bit of confusion as to when the police arrived, is the police officer there? Oh, he's there already. Is because Waddell didn't let the dispatch know that he was going there. He heard the stabbing and he took off.
In the officer, I am not saying that they could not have done things differently. I'm not even saying that there wasn't some slop involved in the actual. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that I don't think a lot of people put this in its proper context. We're talking a single digit number of minutes. An officer has a gun in one hand, a flashlight in another. He thinks there's an intruder in the house.
I don't believe he pulled a flashlight out, but let's look. Okay, so let's look at the key word in this little bit of testimony is suspect. All right. And why did you have your gun drawn? Answer: I didn't know if he was a suspect, or I didn't know who he was. You know, you had a stabbing call, right? Right. He doesn't say anything in his testimony about having a flashlight out. It's not that important, but to me, details are important. He had his gun out. He didn't have both of his hands full.
He does not want to leave the doorway for anyone else to run in or for somebody to run out. And there are two children that are passing away in front of him.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, did he make some mistakes? Yeah, but could he have wrote down everything that was being said to him?
Where did he make the mistake at? I see a sense of urgency. He saved 4 or 5 seconds by not picking up that radio and saying, this is the Waddell, I'm on en route. He just skipped right past that and took off.
That moment, no.
No.
And
we expected him to take notes at that point. We'll get kind of into the notes as we go along. So
you can get kind of into the notes all you want. Notes are not even fucking necessary. As long as what they testify to and what they present in an arrest report, arrest warrant, a police report, as long as it's true and correct, it doesn't matter if they use notes to get it that way or not. And if it's not true and correct, right, then it's gonna, if they're lying or they make a mistake, that mistake will be, they'll find it.
So we'll kind of circle back to that. But no, obviously, when you're in the middle of an emergency, you're not taking notes, right? And now we have.
And on top of the fact, you know, he was a relatively, you know, new officer.
He was. Absolutely.
And he had never seen anything like that before. So he
had one before that, but not, it wasn't kids. And I think he was only on about 2 years.
He was in shock a little bit himself.
Let's see. Waddell had about 7 years of experience, and he had been with Rowlett for 4.5 years, so he wasn't relatively new. These are just details.
And so people make a lot of him, you know, telling Darren and Darlie, you know, go help the baby, go help the baby. That's all he could do at that time, was to tell them what to do and still try to make sure.
And that's what he did. He didn't want to go all the way into the garage. He saw that Darren was doing what he was supposed to be doing, which was trying to save his kid's life. So he didn't have any directives for Darren. Darren was already doing that. Darren was already being a parent and trying to save his child. So what he did notice is that Darlie was just fucking standing there with her rag to her own wound, just staring off into the. And he he can't be down there helping, so he asked her to help, and she didn't. He can't be down there helping. He's got to get some medical attention. There's a child laying over here being unattended to that's bleeding out right in front of him. He might want to jump down there and help him, but he can't. Police training won't allow him. But he can look up and say, hey, you need to get a rag or something, help him. She shouldn't even have had to been directed at all that you need to help your kids. Did somebody need to remind her of that? Oh, that's right. She was in shock, right? She was not in shock at all. Her BP was normal. They did a field shock test on her. She was not in shock. She knows to put that fucking rag to her throat, didn't she?
An intruder does not come out on all of them, or run in the door behind him, or, so, I mean, it was chaotic. I don't deny that. It was very chaotic. So,
walking into, he was a new police officer. And I mean, when you look at the crime.
Nope. He was not a new police officer. So you're getting a lot of details wrong. And all it does, if you just do a simple little research before you shoot your fucking mouth off. I've already proven you guys wrong 3 different times, and one of you believes she's innocent. And it's only been 30 minutes. Almost 6 years of service in 3 different departments does not constitute a relatively new police officer to me.
Crime scene photos, you guys don't. If you haven't seen them, you can go out and find them. If you really do want to look at them, send me a message and I'll link them to you. But also on Rich Prater, who's the PI that kind of works with my group. If you go watch his podcast and just.
Now, did you hear this again? The PI. And it's funny because this video was uploaded 1 year ago. The other reaction I did of her, that video was uploaded 8 months ago. 8 months ago, she was calling him some guy with a cigarette on YouTube, and now but 4 months before that, he was her PI. She calls him a PI. How disrespectful. That's a fucking lie.
Up Rich Prater, Prater, on YouTube. He has an episode where they go over the autopsy photos and the crime scene photos. Now Sasha, who's a fan of mine, who just requested the Santa Rosa case, which actually Arabia is kind of helping me do that. We're tag teaming the Darlie, and she's helping me work on some of my cases. But Sasha, you guys, if you go hit the screen like 1,000 times, this is what I do when I like lives. It will like 1,000 times, and that's what Sasha's telling people to do. So you can just sit there and tap the screen, and it helps both me and Arabia in our content.
Look at them trying to get fake likes, unearned likes. Just hit the screen as many times as you can, and it'll give me a bunch of likes. Even that's fake. I mean, that's a lie. You're directing your subs to do something incorrect. Let me try that. I got a touch screen computer and it ain't working. It's not doing it for her. I tried. But some people had done it because she got 20 likes on that out of 120 subscribers.
And for other people to see this video and join along in the discussion. So
I always tell my people that come to my channel, I want you to hit the like, because she's right. The algorithm is, if it's got a bunch of likes on it, it's going to go in that category of Darlie Routier with a bunch of likes on it, and it is going to spread the word. But I always tell them, if you like the video, then hit the like button. Remind them.
At any rate, so also another thing that's interesting is people say, well, Waddell should have been down and given that kid CPR if he had time to stand there. We're talking that this was seconds, though. This was such a chaotic scene, you guys. This has gone on within 2 to 3 Why didn't the 911 operator give her the instructions?
Okay, so Believe it or not,
Because the 911 operator wasn't, she was trying to gather information about what had happened so far. She only got to the point where okay, she knows there's two little boys stabbed. And then she relays that to the officers that are on the way, you know. So if they're stabbed, right? She doesn't know where they're stabbed, where they're bleeding from. She doesn't know how much blood. She can't say, oh, they've been stabbed. Well, jump down and give them CPR. What if they were stabbed in the neck? What if they were stabbed in the face? What if she's not able to? She didn't know the extent of it yet at that time. That's why she wanted to get the police there so they could see it.
and we're comparing a lot of things done almost 30 years ago to the way that they're done now. It was not required for 911 dispatchers to be trained in CPR. And she just happened at that time not.
Well, again, CPR and stabbing don't mesh. Stabbing and cover the wound is what comes up. Stop the bleeding, not CPR. Stop the bleeding seems to be, and had let's say Darlie called and said, "Oh my God, my son was eating, he's choking, I don't know what to do right now. He's right here in front of me, blah blah." Then she would give her directions as to the Heimlich maneuver because she knows what to do. She knows what the scene is. Doris Trammell didn't get a whole lot of information on what the scene actually was.
To be trained in CPR, she literally did not know how to tell Darlie to give CPR.
Let's see. Well, I knew that I had a friend that's a phlebotomist, and he worked in dispatch for a little while before he went over to phlebotomy, and they were trained. I knew they were trained in CPR, but I just wanted to show it here with a quick AI overview. That the first full year of the dispatcher CPR program was in 1983. All of them are trained in it. So again, she didn't know what was going on at the scene. And when you hear stabbing, to her, you don't think, well, then they probably need CPR because they were stabbed. It could have been somebody stabbed in the arm. If you get stabbed in the leg, you don't need CPR. That's not the first thing that comes to mind.
I think most places now today, that is part of training for.
We just saw that they started that in 1983. Details, people.
911 dispatch, but that's why the 911 dispatcher did not tell Darlie what to do.
And talking about being not uniform with the legal system across the bill, like 911 operators, since I am a last responder and 911 calls us to say, hey, there's a body at this address. And
911 calls you to do that? Because in biocleaning, we always got directed where to go from the coroner's office. The coroner's office always told us the scenes that we had to go to. Once in a great while, it'd be a police officer. But most of the time, it's after they've been turned over to the coroner to go in and clean. We had to go in crime scenes just after the investigations, just after they got all their pictures and stuff. We had to go in once to remove the smell if there's been somebody in there for a while. There's one video I put up where there was they believe it's suicide. And I'm sitting there filming, and there's blood everywhere. And the person had been in there for about 5 days in a 1-bedroom apartment with no air conditioning at the top of a skyscraper in downtown Dayton, Ohio. So they knew something was bad because of the smell in the hallway. And that was one of the scenes where we went in. As soon as they first went in, they got the body out, and that's all they did. And they were gagging and all that stuff from the smell. And our crew had to go in and knock the smell down before you can even start cleaning. and they could do some more investigation there.
We get the same type of information. Like, there's a suicide at 123 ABC Street. That's all we might get. I don't know what I'm walking into, but police and EMTs have already been there, so I feel relatively safe. You know what I mean? Walking into a crime scene.
The officer, and people have said this. I want to clarify this too. So some people say that they can hear on the 911 call the 911 dispatcher dispatching the call. She is dispatching that call to EMS. When she's talking about there is a stabbing, she's talking to EMS. When she dispatched it across to officers.
No. You can see from the testimony that I just showed, when there's a fire code emergency go off to the EMS, it also goes across to the police channel. That's how Waddell heard it. It was the fire code in this particular area, and it's in Waddell's testimony.
That's not when she's dispatching it to officers. She's dispatching that when she goes into detail on the 911 call, when you can hear her saying, 2 children, she is dispatching that to emergency responders, not to the officers.
Right. But Waddell testified that he knew it was a stabbing, but he didn't know that it was 2 children or any of that until later. That was when she didn't even know it was really 2 children until later. The cops got in there and they were telling Doris Trammell stuff, and she was just responding to other officers to come through.
Even in the 911 call, it's hard to understand because originally she thinks there's only 1 child. Then she started saying, no, babies. And she said, are there 2 children? And
no, she asked how many of them there were, and Darlie said, there's 2 of them. There's 2 of them.
Yeah, but there's 2 children. So, it goes from being an unknown medical emergency, like we're saying.
It never was an unknown medical emergency. They knew it was a stabbing.
Where you think, oh, if somebody's had a heart attack in the middle of the night, Waddell walks into the scene. You're on what could have been, in some people's opinions, a triple homicide. You know what I mean?
Right.
See how she changes that word up for her channel, Rich, but not for yours? Pretty disrespectful, huh?
You know what I mean?
Yeah, the officer was not aware of that. And in the 911 call, when the 911 call is being dispatched while she's on the phone talking to Darlie, she is dispatching that part where she's obtained more details to EMS, not to Officer Waddell, who is responding. Right. So, and that's why I think this is a good idea. I think a lot of people truly don't actually know what happened. They just have an idea of what happened from things that they've seen or heard, or, I think a lot of people make opinions on this case based upon not knowing particular parts of it, or
I love how Sully can't get a fucking word in, and Arabia is talking right over
certain pieces of information.
And when we were talking last night or whatever, it's like you need medical knowledge to understand this case. You need legal knowledge. You need police and first responder knowledge.
This case kind of falls across the board in every category. So,
and there's so many different theories, and we're going to kind of get into that. So let's kind of go into the crime. So let's talk about Devin and Damon's wound. So one of the things we wanted to bring up, and this has been stated across, my group, and I want to get your opinion on it. I know you've seen the crime scene photos, is that when Devin was unalived, people believe that he was laying,
Catch that, Rich? Now go back and look how she talked on your channel.
He was sleeping. He was asleep, and he was probably startled awake. And it's my belief that he sat up because there is vertical drippage. Now, I don't think he ever got up to walk around. Now, and I'm talking about Devin here, people, not Damon. We'll get to Damon next. Devin was the one that was DOA on the scene. He was treated by EMT Byford, who testified at the trial.
Byford. And she said it right. I'm not going to give her shit for that.
He calls him DOA at the scene.
He wasn't pronounced DOA until he was actually in the ambulance, though. No. I got it mixed up with Damon. Yeah, Devin was. They felt like he was killed instantly.
In testimony, Darren states that he did try to give Devin CPR. Devin was hit in the pulmonary artery. And just like the movies, it's not like he's just, fluids across the room. Like there's probably some pumping.
And he was also hit in the lung. And so he did more internal bleeding than external. I will say that. The blood kind of pooled because he was laying on his back. And so because vital organs were hit, that is where the blood pool went to from those organs.
That would be called lividity. So he would have lividity across his back if he
pretty much
unalived on his back because gravity pulls that.
Yeah, and so when Darren tried to give him CPR, the blood that shot out was blood that was collected in the vital areas where he.
Yeah, that he was stabbed through the lung, like she said, and Darren said he actually, when he was breathing into his mouth, that it shot out from his chest. There's some reports that Darren breathed into his chest too. There's also reports that Darlie got down and helped hold Devin's chest together. It's a fucking lie.
He was hit. It wasn't like you said, it's not like the movies where it was just spraying all over the place. Because he laid down, his wounds, instead of bleeding outward, they bled internally.
Right.
Yes.
With gravity.
Like
in the mortician world, it's called lividity. And actually, even if somebody has been unalived in a situation for a few days, especially out here in the Texas heat, they'll turn black. Like I've walked into bodies where you can't even tell race because the lividity. I mean, the blood essentially without oxygen, necrosis and begins to decay. So it turns.
And most people are familiar with like what your chest cavity is. Like his blood was pooling inside his chest cavity. So in every crevice, any space there was in there for the blood to leak into, that's where it went.
Hit intercostally, which just means the spacing in between your ribs. So he was hit intercostally, like you said, in the pulmonary. So his injuries are mostly from here up. Damon's are a little bit different. So I do believe that Devin was sitting up. There's vertical drippage of, the red fluid that you can see coming down.
I would agree with her that Devin set up at one point or another because of the wounds as on the underside of his legs and the bruises on his heels. I believe that he was kicking at whoever was stabbing him. And you'd have to sit up a little bit sometimes to do that.
From where his upper wounds are, you can see vertical drippage down his shorts. So let's get into Damon. So what do you think? So we know Damon, received his, because I know Damon also had one in the arm, which was maybe believed to be either his arm was laying kind of where the
it was a defensive wound.
Yes.
He put his arm up as he was being
like this, already asleep, or woke up like this and was hit here, and then it just went kind of through his arm like that, or it was more defensive, whatever. So he does. So Devin does also have a gash in his arm from that kind of. I wouldn't call it secondary, but maybe his arm got caught when the perpetrator went in for that motion.
This will be Devin Routier's autopsy report. In the interest of time, you can pause this where you need to. Kevin fought back. A large dinner, huh? This will be Damon's autopsy report. You can pause where you need to. I'm just going to go through it real quick. Multiple 1-inch scars over the knees. The in the tracheal tube. They did that in the living room there.
alive for about 5-ish minutes, and I hear
He
9.
actually doesn't actually give a timeline. Certain minutes are suggested.
Nope, she knows it. She knows it. And I had that argument with Rich and Tara, and they even doubled down on it that because Mystery Maverick said, and I'll try to quote her, the medical examiner testified on the stand that Damon could live no longer than a maximum of 9 minutes. And that's not what was said. And they doubled down on it. Rich and Tara doubled down on it. Said, well, you got to take this over here and add it there. And divide here, and then run around the house 3 times, then bake a cake, and then come back for 3 minutes, and then you'll have the timeline. No, they said that she said it, and she did not say it.
To her, and she says maybe, but the ME doesn't actually give any type of timeline. She does say minutes.
Right. I mean, you can't because of the
Right.
variations. You
Right.
don't-
So how come you didn't correct Tara and Rich on that, Sully?
Right.
Every injury is
And
different.
you got to remember, we don't know the timeline of the actual attack.
Right. Right. We don't know
So
what happened.
where does the timeline? Right. You don't know how well, we know how it happened, but what I'm saying is, the timeline can start at different parts of the attack, because not all of those wounds would have been fatal if other ones didn't occur. So does the timeline start from the time the lung is punctured, or does it start from the time the arm is cut, or does it, and that is why she did not give a specific time, because if that lung wouldn't have been punctured, that timeline could have expanded. But say that was the first wound, which we don't know, that would shorten the timeline.
That's right.
If it was the last wound, it would have elongated the timeline. And because he
So Sully's agreeing that I was right, because I said these same things on my video about the timeline, about Mystery Maverick getting it wrong. It's in my video.
was attacked twice,
Right.
we don't know in sequence
No,
how far apart the first attack was from the second attack.
the only way she would have been able to tell is if one of those woundings would have been post-mortem, because it bleeds. Well, you don't bleed out the same.
Exactly.
Don't believe it at all.
So we know that none of the children received anything post-mortem. Everything happened while.
And also, neither child was actually seen by a doctor because they were deceased.
Right, they're only seen by the medical
good point,
examiner.
Randy.
So one of them is autopsied at Baylor, Damon, where he was taken, and Devin was taken to the medical examiner's office. And the autopsy reports are out there. Of course, I'll post them for anybody, but they're very easy to find. You can find everything on Darlie Facts. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you for the gift. Can you see all the comments and stuff, Arabia? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Sasha. She's the one, like I said, she's the one that requested our next case, which is going to be the Santa Rosa hitchhiker, which I talked about in my video yesterday. Just reminds me of the Hillside case in Kenneth Bianchi. Kennifer. I can't. Sorry, I'm trying to stay professional here. Okay, let's go back to the Darlie case, though, because that's what we're here for today. So now, for the medical examiner, she can't put a timeline together. She can't state in which order the attack occurred, and she can't even confirm if it was the same weapon that created every single different wound track, right? Because some of them look, and this is due, and I want you to speak to this because
Well, she never said it was different. She said she couldn't confirm
Exactly.
because of the
that weapon.
in the body.
She couldn't confirm it was that weapon.
That's brought up is lines of languor. So why don't, since you're a nurse, you tell us.
You're cutting out on me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Can you hear us? Well, maybe sometimes she has a bad connection. Let's just see if she comes back with us. She will. So anyways, one of the points that the medical examiner is trying to make, though, is that in the body, there's an anatomical word or phrase, lines of languor. And again, I can post a picture of this, but basically the body, the way the muscular is, just like a butcher in a meat shop, uses those lines, and you can even see them in like chicken and stuff, the cutlets, like those are called, that's an anatomical term. It's called lines of languor. And so at different parts in the body, the lines are closer together, spread out more apart, go in different directions depending on how the muscular skeletal structure is. It's different for everybody. Everybody has different lines of languor. It depends on fat content, muscle content. It depends on a lot of different things. So in that way, even when I did my experiments with the cow hearts, again, I can post pictures. I use the same, you know, weapon, and it creates two totally different wound tracks looking, depending on what part of the musculature that it goes through. So even when like plastic surgeons go in to do surgeries and like a C-section or facelifts or cosmetic stuff, they're going to use those lines of Langer to their advantage because you can hide scarring in them. You can hide, it just makes for a neater, I would say, like cleanup or stitching stericycle process when you're two intruders. So you can really, and that's another thing and so that can be really confusing to some people too. And one of the wounds on Damon, if you look at it, does look like one side is blunt and the other side is sharp. And on another wound, both sides look sharp. So I can't rule out a secondary weapon. Now, you can talk again in probabilities and possibilities. Is it possible? Yeah, it is possible that two weapons were used. It's possible that Darlie herself could have used two different weapons.
It's possible that pigs might fly out of your butt, too.
It's possible that there could have been two intruders. You
can't put one intruder in there. You're trying to put two.
So you can really, and that's another thing that makes this case so convoluted, is you can almost spin, because things are talked about in possibilities and probabilities, and a lot of this case is circumstantial.
And there's a difference in possibility and probability. They're two totally different things.
Right.
It's possible that I can run this red light and have an accident. It's more probable that's going to happen if I run this red light and have an accident.
Thank you.
So there is a difference there.
Which you can't really statisticize the human body. It's also different.
And you also, and when you're reading the transcripts, you have to pay attention to things like that.
Yep.
You have to pay attention to the verbiage that is used, because that's an important part of understanding a lot of things, is having an accurate comprehension of what is actually being said. When you read a sentence that said, is it possible, da, 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 that's not the same thing as asking, is it probable?
That's right.
When you hear something being, when you read something saying the probability of, that's not the same thing as the possibility of. So comprehension is very important when you go into reading, especially from, like the legalities or the medical parts of this. You have to put things in the proper context of how they are being explained. Because what one word means to you in a sentence could mean something else to an investigator or to a nurse or to a doctor. Do you get what I'm saying?
The word superficial in this case gets thrown around as one of those.
Exactly. Yeah. Superficial to the layman person is not superficial in medical terms. Superficial in medical terms is not the same thing as, it's different. And that's where I think a lot of people have a hard time following along and arguing over what this means or what this said. There really is a proper... Yeah,
you have to read Dr. Patrick Dillon's testimony on what superficial means, and to him it means a minor wound. And he said if somebody is using it in any other way, they're using it wrong. That's right in the testimony. I don't have time to look at it, but I can tell you it's in Patrick Dillon's testimony about superficial. I want to see what they got to say.
It's like when you're signing a legal document, the fine print.
Lawyer, because those words don't mean what they mean in the general vernacular.
Exactly.
Well, let's look at what the general vernacular is. I'm going to do an AI search, just an AI search on that word. Let me stop right here. Just a quick Google search. I asked, what is a superficial wound in medical terms? Minor cuts, abrasions, scratch. Now, in layman's terms, it's the same thing. They're still trying to play games with that word. They describe one wound of Darlie's as a deep wound, which that cut on her, that stab wound to her upper wrist. But there's that.
Exactly.
And we just got a question. So did they recover any weapons? Yes. Okay. So what happened is, whether or not you think Darlie did it or not, Darlie states that she woke up and follows an intruder the way their house was laid out through the family room, and he went through the laundry room to get to the garage, which is where they believe the intruder came from, if you believe that theory. So the murder weapon, according to Darlie, the intruder left through the garage. She's walking slowly. We know this because it's only low velocity.
Even though she said she chased after him, and Tom Bevel made sure to ink her feet up and have her walk along a long sheet of paper and have her run along a sheet of paper, she walked, even though she said she chased after him.
Markings that are left, which just look like perfect circles. So we know she's not in a fast pace.
Yeah, she's not running.
She's not running. She's walking towards, and she states that he drops the weapon, which came from inside of the house. It came from the Routier's own butcher block. And it was found. So Darlie states that she bent over to pick it up in the laundry room. And when she bent over, that's when she realized that she had the wound to her neck because it gaped open and bled. And that was the first time she states that she realized that she was bleeding. And she picks up the weapon and she sets it on the edge of the bar. And that's where investigators find it. And 911 asks her, going back to the 911 tape again, people will state, well, why did she say twice that she picked up the murder weapon? Well, sorry, schmurder. We've got to watch
He
it.
was being told not to touch anything.
Yeah, you gotta watch it on your channel, it's not on Rich's.
And in response is when she said, I've already picked up the knife.
Prompted by saying,
Yes.
they I think the 911 operator says something like, is there a weapon? And she said,
911 officers or a weapon. Darlie mentioned the knife first. Read the testimony. There's where Darlie mentions the knife first. And Doris Trammell keeps telling her, I need you to talk to me. I need you to calm down. I need you to talk to me. She's trying to get information. The operator, this is the second time Darlie mentioned the knife. Then Doris Trammell says, there's a knife? Don't touch anything.
Oh my God, I picked it up. Oh my God, my fingerprints are on it. You know, and
Yeah,
people.
she wasn't volunteering that information, just, freely speaking. She wasn't volunteering that information. She was actually asked or told not to touch anything.
Yeah, she was told not to touch anything, and that's when she states, "Well, I already picked up the weapon."
No, she mentioned a knife twice, and she was told specifically, "Don't touch anything." Darlie mentioned the knife twice. I already picked it up. Darlie made it clear that she picked it up, that her prints were going to be on that knife.
But I do want to hit on this before we pass by it and forget. Now, it is very common for intruders to take the weapon out of the own person's home, because if you walk into anybody's kitchen that they're probably going to have a butcher block or a knife drawer in their kitchen. And if you go back,
this intruder did not take the weapon out of the house. Must be a very uncommon intruder.
Biggest example that I use is Paul Holes, which he's like my mentor in the true crime world. If anybody knows him, he's the one that solved the Golden State Killer. But he's a homicide detective in Sacramento, in that area, the San Francisco Bay Area.
I asked her once to name me any investigator who's never gotten something wrong. She said Paul Holes, and you can look it up. Paul Holes got a lot of shit wrong.
He's retired now, but we've seen him at CrimeCon a lot, and I think he's one of the leading experts in this stuff that we're talking about, forensics and crime scenes. And
she's been to CrimeCon, and you would have met people like Lord and Arts and Stephanie Harlow and Miss Murder and John Crimes and Gray Hughes. Those are all people that I know.
And stuff like that. Reminder, if you are in here, tap the screen. Tap, 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 tap. That way we can get a wider audience. Thank you, Sasha.
Yeah, that way, yeah. Tap, 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 tap. Thank
you. She's been awesome. She's giving us gifts and commenting. So thank you guys. And so the Golden State Killer, he did this. He would take, and he was a police officer. So he knew, thank you, Sasha. So he knew that you didn't want to be caught. Because if let's say you're just strolling through the neighborhood, out walking your dog at 2:00.
You don't want to get caught with that knife. But it's okay to get caught with a pair of panties.
Well, if you just committed that, if you just came from the Routier house, you don't want to be caught with that.
But you also have to keep this in mind.
But you'll take the panties. Let that sink in, supporters.
He did bring a weapon into the home because he had to cut the screen from the outside to get in. Don't forget that part. So
That's what I think. I think he had probably a pocket knife on him and slit the screen with the pocket knife.
It could have been, but
even though Charles Lynch testified that it was a serrated knife, it had a zigzag pattern in it, and that even though that the glass rods and rubber seal were found in a fiber was found on the screen, they believe he brought his own knife. I believe Darlie opened up that back sliding glass door and slipped out there and cut that screen, and then slipped right back in there and put that knife back in that block, is what I believe.
And that's my theory.
Right. And he could have had a bigger knife. He could have, who knows? But it's those types of small details.
Okay, they're talking about small details. She's talking about how an intruder wouldn't want to take a knife with him. My dog's coughing up a hairball. Right? And then they said he had another knife, right? But he took that knife with him. The one that he had, this pocket knife, he took that knife with him. He wouldn't be caught with that, would he?
That also matter as much as the evidence in this case. And evidence is more than just something tangible. Evidence is more than, the towels that had the blood or the murder weapon. Evidence is more than that.
Sorry, watch your language because we don't want to get
details.
She told her to not say that, but she said it on your channel several times, Rich. There's your respect factor.
Very small details, such as, well, yeah, it's possible to use somebody else's weapon inside their home to kill people. That's done. But he had to have some type of weapon to even come in.
right
Because he cut the screen.
He didn't drop that there, did he? Because he didn't want to be seen with that knife, did he?
According to Darlie.
And this is my theory.
And the probability that somebody comes in with a weapon and then chooses somebody else's weapon is very small.
And that does throw a wrench in things. I will state that to bring your own weapon, but see, if he was caught with just a pocket knife on him that just had cut the screen, it wouldn't have shown up, with any kind of fluids or any kind of, red fluids on it.
He don't want to be caught with that at all, though, right?
But I mean, like the Golden State Killer, Richard Ramirez, there's a lot of people that use weapons from inside the home.
Whoever did this probably was not a serial killer like them. So they're.
The thing is, again, we're talking again, probability versus probability.
Right.
And the one thing I want to again mention before we continue past the weapon is there was a deer hair found on the screen. And they did not have deer. They did not have anything that had deer inside the house.
If you check out Drake Routier's MySpace, he shows where they're hunting. He talks about gaming and hunting all the time.
They didn't have anything mounted. They didn't have anything that, rugs or tapestries or anything.
They had a large field at the end of Eagle Drive, which now is filled in. Darlock's in there. But that was a large field of nothing but deer.
Darren was not a hunter. Now Rowlett is out near a lake where there are deer.
Well, and Darlie also said multiple kids from the neighborhood would climb in and out of that window.
Darlie never said that. Nope. Darlie never said that.
That's why they kept it up.
No, it was up so Dana could smoke that night. Darlie's never said that multiple kids climbed in and out of that window. Never once.
So if you consider the number of kids that climbed in and out of the window to get popsicles out of the garage.
No, that was Devin and Damon that climbed in and out of the window to get popsicles because their mommy was in a room holed up. And they didn't want to just go in and ask for one. They just popped that screen off, went in and got their popsicles, went out and popped that screen back on. Devin and Damon did that. And Darlie never even said that, though.
It could have been picked up from somebody else's home.
Right.
It doesn't.
And the deer hair is from the air. There's deers in that area.
Prove intruder.
And we were talking the other day, every crime scene is going to be contaminated because people don't live in a bubble. We don't live in a sterile home. I've got dog hair. My sister comes over, my brother, all my family comes over here. They could be bringing their own dog hair. They could be bringing, somebody could have dropped a hair on them from work and they come over right after work and then some random person's hair's in my house.
But you're making up a big deal now, a year or so later, about a pubic hair that was found in their Routier's home. First you're saying they're not shit, and now you're going on about a pubic hair.
Jackpot, baby. Thank you, Sasha. You're awesome.
She just got a super chat, which is money in her pocket.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's money for the Darlie Routier case. That's money that was sent to her off the backs of Devin and Damon Routier. Tragedy pimp.
They're awesome. This is, you know what? I think this is actually going really well. I think we're having a very good discussion.
Now that you got a super chat, it's going great.
Are you guys enjoying this? Like if you're enjoying this, if you like this kind of content, us discussing the case like this. And I think this is a much healthier way than what Arabia was saying in the beginning, where TikTok, we can do clapback videos and you can post a comment, but with character limits and not being able to post photos and people not wanting to put content on their own pages to show people what they're talking about, it makes it hard to discuss true crime.
It's hard to have dialogue.
It's hard to have a dialogue, exactly.
Yeah. And then a lot of I've been accused of being nasty, or it's because you only have so many words that you're allowed to type out, so you want to get to the point. It's not
direct and you sound rude just because you're trying to meet a character limit.
So I just stick to what I'm saying and that's it. And some people, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting crime, and there's a lot of different opinions. And my thing is, if you're going to have an opinion in this case, I think you need to understand the case to have that opinion.
Exactly.
Right. And that's what we want is I have an opinion, you have an opinion, Danelle has her opinion. When we all talk about our opinions, Arabia's brought up some points to me where I thought, oh my God, I never thought about that. And I brought up maybe some things for you where you thought, oh, I never realized that. You know what I mean? And then it gives you a new angle to look at things through, and then you have to figure out how you put that into
9 out of 10 people that I talk to about this case believe she's innocent. I'm always the minority opinion when I have this conversation.
Well, that's the people you talk to. You don't hang out in the non-support groups either.
But yes, there are some things that people, and even without other people saying things, there's just things about this case that are like, what the,
Did Darlie and Darren talk about divorce that night? We're never going to know.
Why are we never going to know? You're so pushing Darren's affidavit about the alleged insurance scams, and in that, he states that his wife asked him for a separation. And you're pushing that insurance scam right now against Darren, even though he said that. You say, well, we don't know that. But he said that in that affidavit that you're pushing on everybody right now.
Exactly.
People, you have half people say, oh, Darlie was an amazing mother. Everybody loved her. You have the other half the people said her kids ran around the neighborhood. She yelled at him at the grocery store. Well, I can tell you, my kid misbehaves
at the pawn shop.
Behaves at the grocery store all the time. My kid, I don't have a kid quite as old as Devin and Damon were, but when he gets to be that age, that's the way our neighborhood is.
Yeah.
Well, I've raised several children, and I'd be a liar if I said I never cussed at any of them.
That's right.
Exactly. I'm like, everybody's going to say that you're a bad mom at one point or another. And I've even come on here and talked about the mom shaming.
And who you are the type of mother you are when you have one child changes when you have three.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not the same mother to my 10-year-old that I was to my 26-year-old.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I mean, I didn't. That's really not where I got my opinions from. It was a lot of other things, but
let's get into Darlie's wounds then. Since we talked about the boys, let's get into hers, because this is kind of where we do have quite a bit of a difference of opinion. I think her wounds are more serious. You do not. I'm a mortician. You're an ICU nurse. So this is very interesting. So basically everybody knows, I think that Darlie was injured somewhat severely. I don't think she inflicted her own injuries. I don't think that, I do think she was attacked. I think the bruising on her arm is from the wound that's here.
She thinks everything that is against what the medical people who treated Darlie testified to.
Like we were talking about just with the boys, that blood has to go somewhere. It forms the bruises on the underside of her arms when she's laying in the hospital. That blood is going to pool in those areas. I don't.
It's not blood pooling though. Santos said that was from blunt force trauma.
I don't care about the necklace being stuck in the track or not. To me, that doesn't really make a difference of how bad her injuries were, or whether or not she did it to herself. So the necklace to me is a moot point. If you want to talk about.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, the necklace really didn't have a lot. Yeah.
Either, the injury occurred whether she was wearing that necklace or not, but it was kind of a change.
I think that's more of a I think the necklace is more of a legal issue.
Yeah.
Just or it was used more in the legal than the medical.
Actually, you know what? I did all this work to pull up the pictures as we talked about it, and I'm not even doing it. Okay.
Yeah, I think the lawyers made more of an issue over the necklace than, it just wasn't relevant in my opinion.
Well, and I think for some people it was
a lifesaver.
It
The
was
only reason it became relevant, I think, is because somewhere it was circulated that it saved her life and this and that and the other.
exactly. I was going to say, I think for some people, it's more of a
and that's why I say, if to have an opinion about the necklace, it would come from a medical aspect of it, not so much of a did she do it, did she not.
And the medical evidence on it is that it was never embedded into her wound. It was stuck in the dried coagulated blood, and it was removed before she went to surgery. Darlie supporters would tell you that it had to be surgically removed. No, that's Susan Sarandon that said that.
Do it because whether she did it or not, she had the necklace on when she did it. That doesn't change, and that's why I say it makes no difference personally to me.
right. Gosh, I saved all of her freaking wounds, and now I don't. That's okay. Let me go pull them from my album. Okay, we're going to show you guys the necklace that we're talking about. So while I find this, why don't you get into her sorry, why don't you go ahead and get into her exploratory surgery and talk about that?
Okay, so first of all, it's important to note, and this is what I'm talking about details. Her vitals were normal.
Right.
She did not have high, like her vitals were not alarming
her
at
blood
all.
pressure was slightly low, but nothing to be seriously concerned about at the time.
But she was bleeding, so that, but she was taken to Baylor because it's a trauma unit, or it's a trauma hospital, and but that doesn't mean that that's because she was on death's doorstep. We have a trauma hospital here, U of L. Sometimes people are taken to U of L just because it's closer, but a trauma hospital treats more than serious injury. They're like any other hospital. But she was taken to a trauma center.
Yeah.
And
let me pull up the one.
so as the nurses were examining her neck, her necklace fell off in the hands. The surgery was not to remove the necklace, like has also been circulated. The necklace was not embedded in her wound. But so she had a neck wound. The EMTs were not sure how serious it was. 2 children had just been deceased, and they took her to a trauma hospital because they thought that was the best place to take her, because nobody knew how serious her neck wound was.
Right.
And
that's why they
did surgery. Everybody thought she was attacked, so nobody knew how serious it was on the inside. So when she got to the hospital, she had an exploratory surgery just to make sure that the structures of everything inside her neck were okay.
Isn't that a lot different than emergency surgery? They had to rush her in there and get that necklace out of her wound. No. I've done an hour and a half of this. I've had enough. I'll do some more later. Like, if you like. Comment. Let's discuss.